Now, Reform MP Rupert Lowe has quickly risen to prominence, earning the title of 2024's Rising Star of British Politics. Known for his bold and outspoken views and his fearless stance on key issues, Rupert has become a standout figure in today's political landscape. And he joins me in a moment to reflect on what has been a landmark year in his political career and share his insights and predictions for 2025, a year that's already shaping up to be full of non-stop fireworks and high-stakes political drama. But first, Nigel Farage gave his New Year's address from the birthplace of Winston Churchill earlier today. Let's take a little look.
I got back involved with politics, took the leadership of Reform UK, and I made one big promise. I said in that general election, albeit with 4 weeks to go, we'd get millions of votes and we'd establish a bridgehead in Parliament. Well, that is what we have done. And I think everybody acknowledges that we're just a handful of MPs. We've made a real impact over the course of these last 6 months. And everything we do is based on values. And those values are around the things that matter to us: family, community and country. They're the things that got me back in politics.
Well, to look back on this year and to look forward into 2025, I'm now joined by the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe. Rupert, a very happy new year to you. We're almost there, only one more sleep away. Can I begin by asking you there, Nigel Farage talks about getting that bridgehead, about the values of reform. Can I also ask you to share your experiences on what it's like to be in Parliament? You're certainly putting the cat amongst the pigeons. You're asking for data that they don't want to give away on immigration numbers, on crime by foreign nationality, on tax receipts, you name it. You're making a lot of enemies in all the... what you found in Parliament. Is it as chaotic as you expected?
Well, Martin, first of all, Happy New Year. It's been a pretty tough one. 2 elections and a new career at the age of 66 is a pretty testing time, but it's been interesting. As you quite rightly say, I think the key to this is good government, is transparent government. And what I'm trying to do is use my position to get the data and then give it to people and let them decide, because after all, they're the master. Parliament's the servant. And if they can see that things aren't right through the data, then they can make their own judgments at the next ballot box. So I think that's all I'm trying to do. I don't think it's anything particularly special. With regard to Nigel's address, I think it's from a fantastically historic place, Blenheim. I was there just before Christmas, and it is, if you like, totemic of this country. It's got huge history. Obviously, it's linked with Winston Churchill, who's one of my political heroes, along with Elizabeth I. And I think Nigel made some very powerful points. We've now, as a group of 5 MPs, built the bridgehead. I played my part in encouraging Nigel to come back. I think it was very important that we brought the Messiah back. He played a big role in the European Parliament, following on from Sir James Goldsmith, who I think often gets less credit than he deserves for his 1997 referendum party, which actually was the reason why the 3 major parties promised the referendum on our membership of the EU in the first place. But I think it's a team effort now, and if reform's going to mature, Nigel at the head, we need a group of people, like-minded people, to whom authority and power is delegated to reform what is a 2-party system, Martin, that's failing. It's quite clear to me that the 2 cheeks of the same backside, as George Galloway described them. It's a very weak gene pool. I've been suffering from a terrible cold over Christmas. Parliament is a bit like a black hole. I won't liken it to the black hole of Calcutta. It's not quite that bad, but 650 people like myself packed into a very tight space with very little circulation of air. It's like a sort of a fest for viruses. And it definitely is a building which needs some updating. Rupert. Not just in terms of structure, but in terms of the people who inhabit it. So it's been a fascinating experience, and I'm very pleased and proud that you say I'm one of the rising stars. I don't think of myself as that. I think of myself as just trying to bring some common sense back to the UK.
What do you think it is specifically that they're so afraid of when, for example, I mean, on this show, I've tried to get data in terms of crime type by nationality, data that's readily available in Denmark, readily available in the Netherlands, data that came out from the German federal government. Germany, you know, the liberal Germany, 63% of all benefit recipients are of foreign origin, either born abroad or the children of those born abroad. When we have that data, it allows us to make common sense decisions about potentially who we allow into our country. Do we want more of this nationality? Do we want more of that nationality? Should we be deporting more of these people? Yet they won't give the data out. Do you think they're not recording this data, which is gross incompetence, or they're trying to cover it up, which actually is more sinister?
Well, that's a question. It's an interesting question, Martin. Very well put. And the more I ask these questions, what I ask myself is, do those ill-experienced front bench ministers actually know, first of all, what we're talking about, and are they aware of this data? Because I see their faces. They're actually, when we do get the data, and as you quite rightly say, I think it is there if they care to collect it. I mean, we all have to fill in multiple forms now, and there's all sorts of data collection. I think what's happening in the world is through regulation, we've effectively got rampant socialism, almost Marxism. It's sort of tying the individual down and constraining what I call the two greatest economies in the world. The Anglo-Saxon individualism is being curbed. I question whether, I think the civil service know the numbers. Do the ministers know the numbers? And this is the real key issue, I think, which is worrying, is I don't think if you've got such weak ministers, they cannot hold the civil service to account. And they're called the civil service for a reason. They're supposed to be serving the people. The problem is that the servant has become the master. And without strong leadership from ministers, you will continue to see a growth in the size of a failing, inefficient civil service. You know, just look at the liability we've got, which is off balance sheet for the civil service pensions, Martin, which is heading for £3 trillion. And in the end, I'm sorry to say that governments have a bad track record of cheating on their people, either through inflation or through coin clipping or whatever else. So when they simply get bills they can't afford, they tend to inflate them away, and they tend to rob aspirant middle-class people who've been very prudent and saved their money. So I think it's a case of a malign civil service that is not doing its job, and it's misinforming incompetent government ministers who aren't holding them to account.
Can I ask you about the year ahead? There was a poll out at the weekend predicting that the Labour Party would lose 200 seats if an election were held now. Sir Keir Starmer has all the popularity of a lead balloon at the moment. Reform seems to be doing well, but the data says 72 seats if that cuts through. Still not enough to make that tipping point. Rupert, how big is the challenge ahead? Do you think the entire system is rigged against small parties, or is this a battle that could be historically won, as we saw like 100 years ago with the Liberal Democrats breaking through against Labour?
I think we're breaking through, Martin. I don't trust the polls totally. I like the calculator, which shows effectively if we get to 31% of the vote, we go over that, we start to look like we can form under first past the post an overall majority. Reform must have an overall majority, or it can't do what's necessary to reform the country. And, you know, I'm full of admiration for Javier Milei, who actually responded to one of my tweets himself the other day, which was fantastic. You know, he's showing the world what happens when you try and reverse 100 years of rampant socialism. And Argentina is now hopefully going to be on the upward curve. I think she's certainly showing signs of it. Certainly looking at the share price of her bank stocks and everything else, she's starting to show signs that she's returning to some form of common sense. So I think this year we are breaking through. I think we can deliver more than 31%. I voted for first past the post, even though my instincts are that long-term, maybe proportional representation is fairer. But we need, if this country is going to save itself, Martin, it's got to have a majority for reform who are effectively a party from outside the existing political establishment, who won't be frightened to take the tough decisions. And trust me, they are going to be really tough. And it's not necessarily going to be a great time for the British people, but I think they know that. I think a bit like Winston Churchill promised people a pretty tough time when he told us all to keep buggering on during the war. I don't promise people a great time, but I promise them a much fairer, common sense way of life, which I think we're all used to.
OK, Rupert Lowe, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, and a very happy new year to you, sir. Thank you. All the best.